Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Manchester United by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Patrick Van Aanholt and Gary Cahill after the game. So let's begin.
Wilfried Zaha, edge of the penalty area, moving infield now. It's a dazzling run. Van Aanholt takes over and shoots. Oh, it's in! I don't believe it! Palace have scored in stoppage time. They're back in front. It's 2-1, and it's Patrick Van Aanholt who broke down the left-hand side, combined with Zaha and Benteke, and got it back and fired it past De Gea. Absolute delirium away to our right. Palace were pegged back by James, but in the 93rd minute, they might just have scored the goal that wins them their first league game here in 30 years. Manchester United 1, Crystal Palace 2.
It was one of those Premier League days that gives you goosebumps, away at Old Trafford in the sun, with the belief that Crystal Palace could cause an upset, and Roy Hodgson's side duly obliged with a special performance resulting in a 2-1 win for the Eagles. It was clear in the opening minutes of Gary Cahill's debut to see why Roy Hodgson moved in to bring in the centre-back over the summer, composed, solid and communicating with the Palace back four from the off. Despite a player of Cahill's experience, Old Trafford as a venue of your debut for your new team wouldn't be high on the list of desirables. However, the former England captain was instrumental in the Eagles keeping the game goalless in the opening half an hour. It was Cahill's partner on the left-hand side, Patrick Van Aanholt though, that put in the most important defensive moment of the first half, with the fullback blocking superbly from United's Daniel James as the winger thought he was rifling home from 8 yards. Apart from a couple of spectacular Marcus Rashford free kicks that had Vicente Gaeta casually trotting across his goal line, the Red Devils were unable to make their sustained presence in the Eagles' third amount to anything. In the middle of the park, Jordan Ayew was dropping back to help out with the midfield tussle, supporting the likes of Jeffrey Schlupp and Cheku Kouyaté who were battling for everything. It was therefore fitting that a physical battle won in the air by Schlupp sent Ayew clean through on goal in the 32nd minute. Old Trafford fell silent, Red Devils in fear, and Palace fans in a wishful desire to see the ball ripple the net. A moment that felt like an eternity, that ultimately lasted just a few seconds, saw Ayew display a coolness that everyone else associated with Palace away from the Old Trafford pitch was not. The Ghanaian international slotted past David De Gea and the red and blue corner of Old Trafford erupted. The goal clearly stunned United, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's team only looking threatening once before half-time, which resulted in Cahill getting a yellow card as Anthony Martial looked set to race through into the penalty area. Prior to that moment though, Wilfried Zaha almost doubled the Eagles' lead, with the ball falling kindly to Ivorian in the box at De Gea's near post. However, with the angle rapidly closing, the Spaniard closed out Zaha's effort. Half-time team talks came and went, United returned early and it was clear that Palace were in for another period of being under sustained pressure. And 2 minutes into the second half, James again thought he was destined to score, with Ashley Young cross finding the Welsh international at the back post, but again Van Aanholt made an important block. With Young coming on after Palace's opener in an enforced change for Luke Shaw, Solskjaer made his first desired tactical change on 51 minutes, with Mason Greenwood replacing Jesse Lingard. On 68 minutes, the belief that the Eagles could in fact get their first league win at Old Trafford since 1989 rose, even though the incident was a penalty award to United. Up stepped Marcus Rashford, with the England international sending Gaeta the wrong way from 12 yards. However, the forward's penalty hit the inside of the post, bounced across the goal and away from danger. If the performance from the lads on the pitch and the fans in the stadium wasn't special enough before the 68th minute, it clearly was after. The noise rose, as did the expectation levels that the Eagles could leave Manchester with a positive result. McCarthy was fighting for everything, Kouyaté solid in every challenge, Ayew tracking back from the final third, Zaha and Schlupp filling in at fullback, the Palace defence, supported by Gaeta, a resolute bank. Townsend, Benteke and McCarthy came on for Schlupp, Ayew and Kouyaté at different points in the final 15 minutes, as Hodgson recharged his ranks with fresh legs. As the clock ticked on to the 88th minute, Palace's impressive resilience was broken, with Martial finding James inside the box, with the winger curling one into the top corner from just inside the box. However, there was another twist in the tale for the boys from S4E3. Deep into injury time, Zaha danced into the box before eventually losing possession. Thankfully for the Eagles, the ball fell kindly to Van Aanholt, whose first touch took him past the United back line, before rifling at David De Gea, who was powerless to stop the ball from giving Palace the lead again late on. The rest full-time whistle sounded as the Eagles in the stands, on the bench and out on the pitch celebrated in ecstasy. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts, whether that be on Twitter or Facebook, then of course do head over to whichever site you use, and of course follow our pages at Crystal Palace. Now obviously alongside sort of your general Palace news, we do like to keep it up to date with all the latest transfer news. So obviously we're not in the transfer window right now, but of course there's going to be rumours coming up into January, and certainly beyond, you know, looking into next season, there's going to be lots of rumours, and obviously we want to keep you guys up to date. So if you do want a page where you can follow just to sort of get all the latest Palace news, of course you can do that, and you just have to sort of look at what we've done over the summer. Done quite a lot of work in terms of finding loads of articles, putting them out there as soon as we find them. So if you are someone who really wants to get involved with that, you know, get the latest news, you know, on your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed, as well as obviously just, you know, you can comment on it and have a discussion about these potential signings. Of course feel free to do that, and of course alongside sort of the transfer and just the general news, we obviously do post interviews on there as well, whether that be with players, whether that be with management, and our opinions after the game as well. So literally straight after the game, before we even record the podcast, you know, we go out there's a few of us who are on the page, and we'll just sort of give you you guys our sort of instant match reaction. And of course even before the game, you know, things might happen in the press conference, things might be said, injury, players coming back from injury, players getting injured, all things like this. If you want another place to sort of get an opinion and sort of just listen to what others have to say, of course you can do that via the social media channels. Now a great place for you guys to share your opinion is actually in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, obviously where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, and judging by, you know, the fantastic result we managed to get at the weekend, you know, we're going to be getting a lot of high ratings, and you know, arguably I'm going to discuss it later on, but you know, a lot of players do deserve to get a lot of praise just for the way we approached and the way we also played in the game as well, and the fact that we got the fantastic result we did. So of course do feel free to share, you know, your player ratings, you know, literally even if you don't want to do all the players, certain players in particular who stood out for you, you know, give them a rating or just share your opinion about them. And even if you don't want to do that, or if you're a United fan, comment below with your general views of the game, because obviously Palace perspective, this is a fantastic result. We've finally managed to beat United in the Premier League, which is something we've just been waiting to do for years. This was the 21st attempt, and it was nice for us to finally get that one win against United. And now at least, you know, other than Sheffield United, we've now beaten all the teams that have played in the Premier League since we've been in it. So at least we've finally sort of broken that duck. So obviously a Palace perspective, you know, making history in the fact that it's the first Premier League win against United. Just a really good, solid defensive performance, and of course the goals we scored were good as well. But then obviously if you're a Man United fan, you're going to be a little bit disappointed obviously, but then, you know, you've got to look at social media and see sort of the differences. Some United fans are just going, yeah, fair play, whatever, you scored your goals and you just made it difficult for us, whereas other fans think it's their divine right to win games. And you know, you've just got to look on Twitter, you know, some of the videos I've posted on there are fans just completely sort of having a meltdown about it. And you know, you've got two different perspectives there, but realistically we deserve to win at the end of the day. Yes, United probably could have had a few more penalties here and there. Yes, they had a few chances which, you know, if they'd gone a few inches either way, they might have gone in. A few free kicks, you know, they had chances to obviously win the game, but at the end of the day Palace deserved the win. 2 goals we scored, the defensive performance we put in. So realistically all these sort of United fans who are really salty, really sort of think it's their divine right to win, really just need to have a look at the game and go, actually we were just beaten by not particularly the best team across the whole 90 minutes, but certainly periods in the game in terms of just withholding the opposition. I think we've done a great job, and you've got to really give the team credit there. So like I've said already, you know, feel free to comment below with your general views of the game, and in particular your player ratings, because I'm always really interested in seeing what you guys have to say. And you know, that's why I want you guys to comment, just so that I can see your opinion, compare it to mine, but also, you know, if there's any questions or anything that I might disagree with or we agree with, of course we can have a discussion based on that in the comment section as well. So once again, you know, you guys feel free to comment below with your views of the game, so of course we can get into a discussion there. Now, if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join our Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my play rating, starting to go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Gaeta's performance, it is actually pretty hard to actually judge his performance in the fact that he didn't have a lot to do throughout the game, and, you know, much like he's done throughout the whole of the 3 games this season, when called upon it, he's done what he had to do. So realistically, I think a 6 is a fair result, because he done what he had to do, but wasn't really tested that well. But one thing in particular I want to pick out, which I was impressed with, and well, I'm always impressed with it from him, but when you're up against a quality opposition against as United, you've got to make sure this is pinpoint, and that was just the way he commanded the box, and the fact that he done that really well. And despite the fact that we were under a lot of pressure from Man United, particularly in the first sort of half an hour or so, the fact that they kept putting pressure on us, kept putting balls in the box, trying to just basically force us to make an error, the fact that someone like Gaeta stood up and actually commanded that box well to make sure that we didn't sort of succumb to that United pressure was really really great to see. But then likewise, you've got to say he was untested as well, because the fact that he commanded his box so well, and the fact that the back four and even some of the other midfield players who helped out in defence, they basically meant Gaeta was basically untested for quite a lot of the time, particularly in that first half, mainly just because of the fact that the defence in front of him was doing a great job. So whilst he commanded the box well, and that played its part in terms of overcoming that United pressure, equally, the defence in front of him meant that he was really untested for quite a lot of the game. Now, in terms of the equaliser that United scored, obviously, was it 89th minute, 90th minute? Nothing he can do about that. Curling effort into the top corner. That's a really great goal from James, so no real arguments there. But, like I said, on the whole, I've given him a 6 because he commanded the box well, done what he had to do. And realistically, considering the quality of the opposition in United, he surprisingly had very little to do. And you'd expect United to have a few more chances. And realistically, they're really trying to get into that top 4. They really should be doing a lot better in terms of breaking teams like Palace down. They didn't, which is obviously to our credit, and obviously also meant that people like Gaeta didn't really have much to do. But like I've said already, the defence in front of him really helped. It's sort of a dogged defensive display. All of the players digging in, doing their bit to obviously stop United, which I think we've done really well. And what you've got to consider is one of the main reasons for me that he was really quiet is just that most of United's attempts were either going over the bar, free kicks that went over the bar, or of course chances inside the box which have obviously been thwarted by Palace bodies. People like Cahill, people like Kelly, people like Van Aanholt just putting their bodies on the line, and people like Ward actually putting balls out for throw-ins and things like this. Players just putting their bodies on the line is realistically why Gaeta didn't really have much to do. But like I said already, the fact that he was claiming crosses, the fact that he was just that really extremely calm player in in helping that back four, I think was really good to see. So once again here, Vicente Gaeta, a good performance, fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 6. Now, of course, I talked quite a lot last weekend about Joe Ward and the fact that his performance was completely terrible, and obviously he was at fault for the goal we conceded against Sheffield United. So, of course, coming into this game here the weekend after, we're thinking, this is going to be another horror show. It's going to get absolutely wrong ragged by people like Marcus Rashford, like Martial, and it's going to be a similar day at the office where, Ward's going to spend most of the game sort of having to catch up with attacking players that have got behind him. Now, whilst that sort of was the case here, and the fact that, yes, he might have struggled a little bit at times with Marcus Rashford, the fact that he done a lot better than he did against Sheffield United last weekend, and actually only allowed him to get into the box a few times, whereas against Sheffield United many times he was obviously getting the better off, or the opposition players were getting the better off of him. It was nice to see him actually have an improved performance. And I talked about the fact that he's our only right back and there's a lot of pressure on him, but it was nice to see him actually pick himself up from what was a really terrible performance against Sheffield United. Now, in terms of Marcus Rashford, obviously that was the main guy he was up against. Not often actually allowed him to get into the box, and basically what Ward did, maybe it wasn't fantastic, but just a simple thing he done in terms of not allowing Marcus Rashford to actually be that first option, to get inside the box, obviously slowed down United's play, and particularly around the box where, they're trying to find a way to break down our back four. People like Joe Ward just putting in a shift and stopping people like Rashford obviously slowed their game down and just allowed us to sort of rebuild or reshape in order to sort of deal with the next phase of play from United. So little things that Joe Ward was doing just basically just slowed United down around the box, and really ultimately that helped us, because I talked about Gaeta not having much to do. We've got people like Joe Ward just doing little things here and there to slow down the play, obviously helps the whole team out. Now, of course, we know he isn't the fastest player, but when Daniel James was coming against him, particularly in that second half, I think he basically just used every sort of every sort of ounce of pace he had to try and keep up with him. And considering how fast James is, I think Ward done a relatively good job and coped well. Basically coped well for the majority of the game against him until we scored. Obviously, he let him too much space, 10 yards out, and of course he whipped it in for the equaliser into the top corner. So, considering Ward is probably one of the slower players on the pitch, the fact that for the majority of the game, other than the spectacular goal that James scored, he done a great job in terms of containing him for that second half of the game, which is something we've really got to give him credit for, because, like I said, going back to last weekend, said he weren't that great, and obviously getting run ragged, whereas this game, complete opposite, actually dealing with players well, other than maybe one or two occasions here and there. But like I've said, it was a decent performance from him. Yes, there were a few times where Rashford might have got the better of him, and that was just purely down to pace. But I think on the whole, gave a really, really good account of himself, doing what he has to do. And for me, the main thing I want to pick out from his performance is just the fact that his contribution allowed us to slow down United, regain our shape, and ultimately just deal with next phases of play. So for me, even though there was nothing spectacular in the game, little things here and there was what impressed me. So I do think Joe Ward fully deserves the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our 2 centre-backs, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now once again, Kelly was another player I talked quite a lot about, last weekend against Sheffield United. Him and Dan obviously were the centre-back partnership there, and to be honest, even though it was a dismal defensive performance last weekend, I do think that Kelly and Dan came out with the game with a little bit less sort of criticism than, say, people like Vellano and Ward did get. But this was a performance much like Ward's, where he obviously kept his head up, come into the next game and put in a really solid performance. And I do think he does deserve the 7 I've given him. Now, in terms of just the overall performance, it was another good defensive shift. And this is something we've come to expect from Martin Kelly. But I've seen a lot of people talk about this on Twitter, and I think it's really important, is that the big part, or the big sort of underrated aspect of our squad, is that there's people like Martin Kelly, like MacArthur, who their performances, they may not always be great, but they never seem to drop below par. And the fact that James Tompkins is out injured, Mamadou Sakho is out injured, the fact that we've got someone like Martin Kelly, who really is underrated in the fact that he slots into the side, never puts in an under par performance, and does what he has to do, was really great to see. And the fact that he done that like he always does when he fills in the side, and as he's done the last sort of 2 games prior to the United game, but the fact that he's managed to sort of up his game even further to deal with that threat and the quality of position of United was really great to see. And there were a number of times where he made a number of good challenges, just dangling a leg out just to get the ball out for a throw in, or to hoof it out for a corner. Just little things like this, just clearing the danger and not actually hesitating and just doing what your instinct is telling you to do, particularly in these dangerous situations where United, if they get a few more yards in, they're going to get inside the box. So little things like that is what I was really impressed with his game. Now there was one moment where he obviously nearly sort of let Man United score. Obviously that was when he went to take a clearance, didn't quite fully collect with it early in the second half. But then the fact that he made that little error there, nothing came from it anyway, but the fact that he sort of made amends for that by obviously making a crucial tackle on Martial later on in the game, really just goes to show the class that Kelly's got. The fact that yes, he can have a little slip up here, doesn't really let that affect his performance, and then when another situation comes, he's able to put in a really, really good challenge to deal with it. And once again, going back to that point about his performance, or him being an underrated sort of aspect of our squad, this was a perfect example of that. He's playing now, as our sort of main centre-back, as, people, that Tompkins and Sakho are injured. Obviously, Dan's been dropped to the bench now. So the fact that Kelly's maintained that spot in the team, and obviously Dan's been dropped, obviously just goes to show how good his performances is, and he certainly does deserve the chance he's been given to play a centre-back, and the fact that he's taken it and he's now, formed into a really, really solid Premier League centre-back is, of course, great to see. Now, of course, going back to that tackle on Martial, some, United fans who arguably they're going to find excuses, they're going to try and blame things, obviously the fact that they think they have a divine right to win, so of course they're going to say, it probably could have been a foul, but the fact that VAR was used and the referee disagreed, I don't really think there's much to dwell on there, not really much to talk about. And to be honest, there were numerous other challenges that were put in the game which maybe could have been more of a penalty or more of a free kick or more of a foul than ones that were given in the game. But at the end of the day, I think most of the decisions in the game were all right. When VAR was used, it gave one of the penalties. obviously didn't give a few of the other ones. But on the whole, I don't really think we can blame Martin Kelly for that, because that was just, you know, stepped up, made a crucial challenge on Anthony Martial, stopped him from scoring. And I think, you know, that's going to be the end of the story. A good challenge there. So, once again here, Martin Kelly, you know, considering he wasn't great, or he wasn't the greatest last weekend, the fact that he's coming with a even better performance here, done what he had to do defensively, worked well as a unit with the other players in the back four, and obviously Gaeta as well. So the fact that he just slotted in well, done what he had to do, really dealt well with people like Martial, was great to see. So once again here, Martin Kelly, I do think the 7 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the second centre-back, and that is Gary Cahill, who I am going to give an 8 overall. Now, in terms of Gary Cahill's performance, obviously I did sort of predict that he would have started the first game in the season. Obviously he didn't. Scott Dan took his place, and of course, you know, going into the next game against Sheffield United last weekend, I thought maybe Gary Cahill, maybe given that chance to, you know, make his debut for Palace. But then when you looked at it, it's like, oh, he didn't really play much last season for Chelsea, so of course he still needed a little bit more pre-season, a little bit more time to obviously get back up to speed. And ultimately, you know, he's obviously done that now, got his start at the weekend against United, and what a performance it was, you know, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. And, you know, it's always good to obviously have a good performance on your debut, but to have as good as a performance he had on his debut at Old Trafford, and the fact that he was a Palace win as well, really just combined on what was a fantastic day for him, but also for Palace as well. Now, one of the things that I think many people picked out is his experience, and we said when he signed for Palace, you know, his experience is going to be invaluable, and particularly with the injuries we've got to Tompkins and Sacco, we know that, you know, Cahill's going to be a really important player for us, but it showed in volumes in this game here against United how sort of valuable his experience was, because it allowed him to read the game really well, so he was able to deal with any threats that United were really throwing at us. Obviously he was organised as well, so he was making sure the rest of the back four were in line in the right places. And actually there was another occasion where he was actually saying, you know, come on guys, you need to actually push up a bit and actually help us actually try and get into United's half. And little things like that just shows the experience he's got, because people like Van Aanholt and Kelly were playing quite deep, and even Ward as well were playing quite deep, and Cahill's saying to them, you know, trying to organise them and say, play a little bit further up the pitch, because obviously it will allow you to deal with the threat even earlier, further up the pitch, but also allow us to, you know, make it easier for us to break in to the opposition's half. So little things like that, you know, in terms of reading the game well and just making sure the rest of the back four were organised and actually also reading the game really well, was something that I really like to see. And, you know, when you consider last weekend how disjointed the Palace defence was, how all over the place certain players was, the fact that Van Aanholt and Ward were getting run ragged, the fact that Cahill's coming to the side seemed to marshal them really well, seemed to not only, you know, him himself actually deal with United really well, but he seemed to sort of help the rest of the back four, and I suppose the rest of the team as well, to actually deal with United as well. Now, like I said already, I've given him the 8, and I think the main reason for that is just how his sort of experience sort of shone through, and whether that's his experience in terms of, you know, how to play and how to deal with certain threats, or if you just look at it in another way, and this is also how I look at it, the fact that he has that experience of playing under really sort of high intensity, high pressure games and moments, that sort of experience allowed him to overcome that pressure and just play, you know, like he would do any other game. And, you know, you've got to look at some of the moments in the game he was involved with, you know, pressure from United, you know, a number of vital headed clearances, particularly in that second half, but even early on there were a few chances and Cahill just made himself big and made the challenge or made the tackle or made the block that he had to do. So whilst he showed his experience in terms of how he played, he also showed that experience in terms of how he dealt with that pressure and was able to sort of just play without sort of that backpack on that, without that pressure on his back, to actually perform well against the opposition. And, you know, yes, there were a few fouls in dangerous areas, which, you know, arguably, you know, you got a yellow card for one of them, and there could have been other ones where players are like, well, maybe he's the last man there. He maybe could have got a red instead of yellow. Other times where he's like, oh, that's a bit of a dangerous challenge. But I suppose it shows his experience where he does a challenge which could go one way or the other. But the fact that he does it just about right, not to get a booking or not to get penalised for that, I suppose once again going back to experience shows that. And I suppose I probably could have given him a 9 if he didn't get that yellow card. It would have been the perfect sort of cherry on the cake, and probably would have given him a 9, because without that booking, it would have been an absolute class performance from him. And considering he hasn't had much of a pre-season, he's obviously only had, what, maybe 4, maybe 5 weeks or so. Maybe he could have been training over the summer, but in terms of with Palace, only had a few weeks or so. So the fact that he's come into a game as high pressure and high profile as this and performed as well as he did was really great to see. And I suppose going back to his signing, he does look like to be sort of a major coup for us. You know, yes, it's a 2-year deal, and people are going, oh, we're signing old players. You know, was he 30, 33, 34 now? We're saying, well, signing old players, our average age is going up in the squad. But actually, if you look at it and you look at performances like this, he is a valuable signing for us, because not only does he perform well, but he also helps the rest of his teammates, and just that general sort of experience he has can rub off on obviously the squad as well, but actually some of the younger players as well. So he does really look like a major coup. And you know, when you consider other clubs, I think like Burnley were looking at him, and you know, I think Aston Villa maybe as well. So there were teams looking at him. So the fact that we've managed to get him is obviously a major coup. Maybe London, you know, being in London, obviously he can just stay where he's living now. Maybe that was one of the reasons he came to Palace. But I also do think, you know, the way he talks in interviews, and you know, he's really up for this challenge. And you know, long may he continue if he can have performances like this week in, week out. Now, in terms of just, you know, overall, you know, sort of summarising his performance, obviously I think the 8 out of 10 is the best way to do so, but you've got to look at his authority, you know, the way he marshalled the game in terms of aerial duels, in terms of making challenges. And yes, obviously he was a tad fortunate that he only got the yellow card there, but aside from that, the fact that he stepped up to, you know, claim balls as you would expect from a player who's played for Chelsea, played in the Champions League. Yes, you would expect him to obviously step up, get the ball down, deal with it, or you know, deal with threats. And yes, you'd expect that. But the fact that he done it so well, as well as just showing that authority and that experience as well, was invaluable to the result we got, you know, against United. And like I said at the beginning, it's a historic result. Obviously, first time we've beaten them in the Premier League, and obviously Cahill, in terms of being that focal point of that defence, being that sort of rock at the back, he done a really solid job of doing that. So once again here, Gary Cahill, his first game for Palace, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our back four, and that is of course the left back Patrick Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, much like Joe Ward, this was a player who I criticised quite a lot against Sheffield United, just because his performance was completely sort of lackadaisical. He was obviously leaving too much space on that left hand side, which allowed Sheffield United to exploit it. Now, coming into this game, once again, we were quite worried, you know, that would be a weakness in the team that United would exploit. But actually, it was a much more improved performance on the whole from Van Aanholt, both defensively and offensively, and I think he does deserve the 7 I've given him. Now, in terms of who he was up against, obviously, Wan-Bissaka, obviously, at Palace last season, we're not going to talk too much more about him, but the fact that Van Aanholt was up against him, he seemed to get the better of him on a few occasions, and of course James as well, obviously playing down United's right hand side. So you've got two players there. Obviously Wan-Bissaka's the main guy who's obviously meant to deal with people like Zaha and Van Aanholt down that side, and of course on the opposite side, or the opposite way around, you've got to look at Van Aanholt, who's obviously going to be dealing with James and stopping him getting into or cutting inside from that right hand side. And to be honest, I think he done really well. So not only was he able to deal with, you know, someone like Wan-Bissaka in an offensive sense in terms of getting past him, but he was also able to deal with the defensive work. You know, people like James, who, you know, we know how good he is, as we've seen the goals he scored in the last 2 games. So the fact that Van Aanholt was able to deal with these guys, particularly after that horror show, car crash, whatever you want to call it, last weekend, was of course great to see. And you know, I talked last weekend about the fact that, you know, even though he was diabolical defensively, he didn't even show an sort of an ounce of actually good attacking play. This game here, much like his defensive work, it was the complete opposite. He provided that much needed attacking outlet down that left hand side, and we've seen him do it in the past, but not much this season. Obviously it's only been 3 games, but we haven't seen it in these 2 games. So the fact that he actually just gave us an outlet which allowed us to counter attack and, you know, allowed us to obviously play higher up the pitch was obviously great to see, because for the majority of the game we were under the cosh. United had that presence and were putting us under pressure, but the fact that we had someone like Van Aanholt, who, yes, he done his defensive work good, but he was finally getting back to his old self by providing that attacking outlet, was of course great to see as well. And I think his performance was obviously sort of summarised and sort of the cherry on top of the cake, whatever you want to call it, epitomised, I think is a good word to use, by the fact that he obviously got that winning goal in the 93rd minute. And, you know, you've got to look back at the goal, and it was all down to 3 players. Obviously Benteke winning the ball, passing it out to Van Aanholt, he passes it to Wilf, Wilf makes a run into the box. You know, obviously the ball falls quite nicely to Van Aanholt, and of course he puts it past De Gea. And, you know, that goal realistically obviously we know it was important for us to get the win, but I think in terms of his confidence, it could be a very crucial goal, because he's finally got his first goal of the season, he's finally got his first good performance of the season, so hopefully we can see him kick off from there. But like I've said already, you know, defensively, for the most part, he dealt with Wan-Bissaka and James quite well, and of course, you know, going forward as well, he was able to, you know, get the better of Wan-Bissaka on a few occasions. And, you know, like I've said already, you know, the movement of people like Wan-Bissaka and James obviously would make his life quite difficult, because of course, you know, that the movement that these two players could have in terms of 1-2s could make life difficult for Van Aanholt, both when he's going forward and going back as well. But the fact that he done pretty well to manage that, and particularly the one-on-one situations with them two players in particular, was really great to see. And, you know, we saw, I suppose this is going a bit off subject, but we saw players like Ayew, who obviously he played fantastically well, was obviously, you know, high up on the man of the match shortlist for most people, but he obviously put in so much effort that he got tired out towards the end of the game, whereas Van Aanholt was the complete opposite, where he was doing a lot of work throughout the whole game, but he didn't get tired, and he had that energy right until the last moment of the game. And of course that's why he made that run down that left hand side and was able to obviously score the goal he did. And of course it was obviously a good goal in terms of from a tight angle, getting it under the goalkeeper, but of course we all know that David De Gea should be doing better there, but luckily for us it went in, and it was a nice goal. And, you know, the fact that United literally scored just a few minutes before and we were all like, oh, whatever, you know, we'll take a 1-1 draw, the fact that we just had that excitement of just going up the other end and scoring, and then still holding out for them extra few minutes to get that result, and then that relief on the final whistle was so great to see. And of course Van Aanholt was really key to that. The fact that he managed to, you know, keep his energy quite consistent throughout the whole game, and then that little burst of energy right towards the end of the game to get us that crucial winning goal was of course great to see. So once again, a much improved performance from Patrick Van Aanholt, playing at left back from last weekend. So I do think he does deserve these 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that is of course the captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now this obviously may come as a little bit of a surprise, the fact that the whole team had a really good solid team performance, obviously everyone working together to get that result we did, and arguably, you know, you've got to say Luka was quite key to that. But then you look at some parts of his game and it was a little bit disappointing, and I think the word to use is rash, and I think quite a lot of people said that about him on Twitter, and I think it is a fair reflection overall. So that's why I've given him a 5 here. And whilst there were some good parts of his game in terms of, you know, that midfield battle and, you know, really dealing with that pressure that United were putting us under, there were obviously other parts of his game where he wasn't quite up to the standard that he usually is. So obviously, just to sort of go over a few things, obviously one of the main things for me that stuck out and I'm like, hey, you should really be doing better here, is just where he gave United too much space in the middle of the park, and that obviously led to him conceding fouls, because of course he's letting players get past him, and the only way to stop them is obviously to make the foul. And quite a lot of the time it was in threatening areas of the pitch. So, you know, you're looking at sort of in very good free kick positions either side of the goal, you're looking at just in front of the area. So whilst, you know, he was at least making challenges and stopping that United's attacks by obviously just tackling them down, obviously the negative of that is the fact that he was causing too many fouls, because if he had just played a few yards further forward, or if he had just made the challenge a little bit earlier, then he wouldn't have given them that space, or wouldn't have committed the foul in the first place. Now, eventually, you know, he's making these rash challenges all day. Eventually, it led to him giving away the penalty. Obviously, stuck out a leg. Obviously, player's gone down in the box. You know, I don't think there's any arguments about that. That's a silly penalty to give away. But, you know, he'd been doing that all game, so it really just summed up what he had been done. And of course, we were quite lucky that the post bailed us out on that one, because arguably we deserved to concede, because that's just a silly mistake to make. But then you've got to look at the positives of his game. You know, yes, he was committing these fouls, but I think there were times when he was on the ball and we were on a foray forward. I think he was quite composed with the ball. But then likewise, you know, going back to the fouls, there were a few clever fouls as well when needed as well. So I think he didn't quite get the balance right in terms of between the fouls and in terms of good tackles or clever fouls, whatever we want to call them. And, you know, most of them weren't that great. But the fact that there were a few times when he was obviously composing the ball and combined that with making these good fouls when needed was of course good to see. Now, in terms of his first half performance, he did look a little bit frustrated, and obviously he was not awarded the free kick after he got pushed over by Jesse Lingard in a late tackle. And considering other players have got booked for similar things in games, you're looking at that going, maybe Jesse Lingard coming in late into the tackle, maybe should have been done there. And then of course in return, Luca once again made one of these rash challenges and obviously fouled Jesse Lingard as well. Now obviously that was all combinating in the fact that towards the end of the game picked up a yellow card, and obviously that's when his foul count sort of tallied up, and the referee's like, well, he's got no other choice, he's made too many fouls now and deservedly gets the yellow card. And you know, like I said already, you know, the fact that he gave away that penalty with a clumsy tip really sort of epitomised his performance. So whilst I probably could have given him a 6 because some parts of his game, in terms of when Palace were in possession, that was very good, but when we were out of possession he wasn't as composed on the ball as he was, or sorry, he weren't as composed in terms of making challenges when we were out of possession, whereas when we were in possession he was very composed on the ball and was able to do good work with it. So overall I do think the 5 is a fair result. Obviously a bit surprising when you have such a good team performance that your captain is one of the worst players on the pitch, but I don't think it was a case of him being terrible. It's just the fact that some of his decisions weren't quite up to the standards he made, and that was obviously in particular with the tackles and the fouls. So once again here, I do think the 5 is a fair result for our captain Luka Milivojevic. So now I'm going to move on to our second player in our midfield, and that is of course Cheku Karte, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Karte's performance, I've obviously got to say, obviously with him being at AFCON and him obviously having a slightly shorter pre-season and the fact that he's come back late, this was obviously his first start for Palace, and actually he was a welcome addition to the side because he gave us that steel in the midfield and that tenacity, that sort of energy that we've been missing in the last few games. And you know, yes, you could pick out people like Van Aanholt and Ayew for scoring the goals and people like Cahill for our defensive performance, but you've also got to look at someone like Karte and what he brought to the midfield, which we've been missing in the last 2 games. That was also quite key to the result we did get. Now, unlike Luka, who of course made loads of rash challenges, Karte timed most of his tackles to perfection. He tackled really well, and the fact that everything else in the midfield he'd done in terms of using that physicality, he bossed it. You know, he bossed the midfield, made life difficult for United, and arguably, like we've seen last season in terms of how well he plays in the midfield, he done a really great job in terms of you know dealing with the threat that United were putting us under. Now obviously there was little things here that that were a little bit disappointing. The fact that yes, he was really good at making these challenges and actually driving forward, but then when it came to him being in possession, he kept giving the ball away. He was being quite sloppy there, but you know, you cannot be denied the fact that he was playing everywhere on the pitch. His movement was fantastic. So if you're moving so much across the pitch, ultimately, understandably, you're going to give the ball away quite a few times because you're playing in different positions. That's not an excuse for the fact that he should be a little bit better in possession, but you've also got to look at it and go, he really should have been, he really was a nuisance for the United players to deal with, just because the way he was moving, the fact that he was making these tackles, the fact that he was using his physicality just to boss that midfield and drive forward. So everything about his midfield game was all about disrupting Man United and allowing us to go further up the pitch and just giving us that energy which we've been missing in the last few weeks. And you know, like I've said already, he was really quite crucial, as much as the defence and the goal scorers were, in terms of us getting the result here. Now, in terms of his work rate, you can never sort of criticise it, because his work rate is always sort of 110%. But this game in particular, being that workhorse in the midfield, he showed that really good work rate throughout the whole game. And whilst obviously he was sloppy in his passing and he was quite slow in terms of when he got the ball, what to do next, what to do with the ball, his main job was obviously to be that midfield disruptor, you know, be that defensive force in front of the back four to give that extra protection. And the fact that he done that job well, which was his main job, is the thing that you want to praise him for. And you know, you've got to look at literally a few sort of seconds or whatever into the second half, a solid start to that, and the fact that he made a crunching tackle. So the fact that he just came out from half time and just carried on what he'd done in the first half, just like that, really goes to show his how good his performance was. Because sometimes players come out and it might take them a few minutes or so just to get back into the game, but the fact that he was on it right from the off go, coming out for the second half, was something you really like to see. And the fact that it wasn't just a normal challenge, but it was a really nice crunching challenge as well, just makes it even better. And you know, he's one of these players who sometimes might be a bit quiet at the start, but slowly grows into the game. He started the game really well and just improved as the game went on, and that really just goes to show how much of a crucial asset he is to the side. And I think that when we play teams like United, who of course, when we're playing against them, we need to be mainly defensive and maybe break, I think it's better to play someone like Karte. Whereas say when we're playing a team where sort of same level of us, or their defence, whatever is their weakness in their team, like Sheffield United really, because yes, their defence is good at playing that back five, but we really should be playing a creative player, whereas when you're playing a team like United, you need someone like Chiarte. So someone like Max Meyer, obviously he didn't play great against Sheffield United, but he's the sort of player more suited to that game, whereas this game here, where we had that high intensity, that high pressure from United, Chiarte was the perfect player for that, and that's shown by the fact that he started and he played as well as he did, was of course crucial to us getting the result. So once again here, Cheku Chiarte, first game back in the team of the new season, and certainly deserves the 7 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the final player in our midfield, and that is of course James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, one thing in particular about his performance, which I saw quite a few people picking out, and I thought I might as well add it in here, is the fact that Ashley Young was one player in particular who kept moaning at McArthur, and when that is the case, I don't think you really be going far wrong. And of course, the fact that McArthur didn't really do much wrong in the game obviously meant that Ashley Young was complaining at him for quite a lot of the game. So that's just one thing really I wanted to pick out before I go into sort of detail about his performance, is the fact that you can really tell that McArthur was doing the right things, not going far wrong, mainly because of someone like Ashley Young, who likes to complain, is obviously complaining at you. Now, of course, in that first half in particular, we were quite overrun in the midfield, but I still think McArthur done a shift in the midfield and done what he had to do. And I think more in the second half, I think he made his presence known. He made life difficult for United. He was breaking play down, doing basically what Chiarte was doing in terms of breaking play down, getting the ball forward. And, the fact that he was the main guy marking Paul Pogba as well, and the fact that Pogba didn't have the greatest of games, not because like there's been a debate about whether he's a good or bad player. It wasn't the fact that he's a bad player, it's just the fact that he was having an off day. And you could argue that the fact that McArthur was one of these players who was sort of man-marking, in fact, the majority of the game, was something to really talk about. So the fact that in the first half we were a little bit overrun in the midfield, but the fact that McArthur put that behind him, and in that second half we were 1-0 up, we wanted to try and conserve that lead we had. He obviously made his presence well known, and arguably done a really good job of that, and that's why I've given him a 6 overall. But the reason I can't really give him anything higher than the 6 is just a little bit of inconsistency in his play, and that's, I suppose, I've compared him to Chiarte in terms of his good parts of his game, but the bad parts of his game, or not so good parts of his game, were quite similar to Luca in the fact that he was a little bit inconsistent with his play. He had some really good bits here and there, and particularly when he's doing his defensive duties along up against Pogba. But then on the other side, there were a few times here and there where it's like, you should be doing a little bit better with possession, or you should be doing a bit better driving forward. But I do think on the whole, I do think these 6 is a fair result. And when you consider, I think like he always is, he was busy in the midfield, he put in a busy performance, covering quite a lot of ground, covering a lot of different positions, making sure he's doing both defensive and offensive work. But the disappointment, and the reason he's really limited to the 6, is just for the fact that he was a little bit inconsistent, and it was the main thing for me that was a little bit of a bugbear. It was just how sluggish he was in possession. So rather than obviously allowing us to take advantage of the little possession we didn't have that much possession, so we needed to really cherish it. But when we had the possession, he was quite sluggish with it, just kept giving the ball away, and just one or two times more, one or two times, well, too many times, I think is the best way to put it, than you would expect from him. You can expect him against a quality opposition of United to maybe lose the ball 3 or 4 times, but it was a few too many that he kept losing the ball. And that really just goes back to that bit about him being inconsistent, because there were some parts of his game where he was really good with the ball, but in other parts of his game where he obviously was giving the ball away, he was a bit sluggish in possession. And you've got to look at the first 45 minutes, going back to that, and one of the reasons we did struggle, and the fact that we didn't really have a lot of possession, was just because people like Luca and like McArthur were just giving the ball away quite freely. But the fact that he improved that in the second half, and he provided that cover, particularly in that second half, for Ward as well, was something that was really impressive. So I do think the 6 is a fair result. A performance where, yes, we may have been a little bit overrun in that first half, but in the second half you came out of yourself, you were putting yourself about a bit, marking Pogba quite well, and really putting in a busy performance, covering a lot of the field. And in terms of frustrating United, and in terms of slowing their play down, I do think McArthur, in particular in the midfield, done a really great job of that. And the fact that he combined that general sort of midfield work with the offensive work, and of course the defensive work where he was covering Ward down that right hand side, was really great to see. So once again here, I do think the 6 for McArthur is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our front three, and that is of course Jeffrey Schlupp, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, of course, there was quite a lot of debate before the game as to who would start, and we know Roy Hodgson's normally quite stubborn, doesn't really make changes, but actually he made 4 changes for this game, which is really unlike him, and people were going, it's a terrible mistake, why would you drop this player, why are you dropping that player, why are you bringing Schlupp in when he's only played, whatever it was, half an hour of one game. But actually, in the end, it turned out to be a really great sort of master plan from Hodgson, change up the side, put in the players he needed to deal with United, and Schlupp was certainly one of them, hence why I've given him the 7 out of 10. Now, in terms of his value to the squad, much like what I sort of said with Kelly, in the fact that when called upon, he can do a job, whether that be playing as a centre-back or playing as a right-back, whereas in Schlupp's case, he's proved once again that he's a brilliant sort of valuable utility player. He can obviously play at left-back. We've seen him play in central midfield last season, and of course this game here, even though he was sort of playing basically a midfield role, he was playing quite further forward, so almost as a winger. So once again showing his versatility in the fact that he can play numerous positions, and that, I think that really allowed him to gel quite well in this game here. And like I've said, since Hodgson's taken charge, we've seen Schlupp play numerous positions, and it was no different against United. And that sort of I suppose that transition between having that ability to play in different positions and having that experience of playing there before allowed him to move amongst the midfield to the attack throughout the game against United, and I think he done a fairly decent job there. Now, of course, for the majority of the game, for the most part, he was playing in a much more further role, and actually, he was up against Wan-Bissaka, no easy task, but he actually caused him quite a lot of problems down that left-hand side, and we know that Schlupp's got pace, but he's not always got the end quality in terms of he can score goals, he's got that end quality, but in terms of putting balls into the box, that's something I've wanted to see from him for ages, because he can score goals, we've seen that, but in terms of just putting balls into the box, in terms of challenging fullbacks, I haven't quite seen that yet, and people may disagree, but that's my personal opinion. But the fact that he was able to cause problems for Wan-Bissaka in particular, who we know is a fantastic player, was of course great to see. And we all know how good Wan-Bissaka is. We know it's not an easy task to get the better off of him. So the fact that Jeffrey Schlupp was able to do that on a number of occasions was of course great to see. Now, in terms of our opening goal, obviously the first player involved in that move was of course Vicente Gaeta. He obviously pumped the ball long from his goal kick. Really great delivery, pinpoint onto Jeffrey Schlupp's head. He's obviously up against Lindelof, who's a lot taller than him, but Schlupp's managed to jump higher than him, head the ball into the path of Jordan Ayew, and of course Jordan Ayew's gone through slightly under the hair to make it 1-0. So obviously the pass from Gaeta was great in terms of the pinpoint accuracy to actually get it to him, the lift and sort of direction of the ball, I suppose. And then you've also got to look at the fact that Jeffrey Schlupp, not one of the tallest players on the pitch, but yet he's managed to beat Lindelof into the air and get the right angle on him to flick the ball right into Ayew's path, putting Ayew right in between the two centre backs, and of course he went through to score. So not only was Schlupp obviously contributing in just sort of a general attacking play in terms of just getting in and around the box, troubling Wan-Bissaka, but actually he was there to turn provider for like we saw with Ayew there, in terms of getting in a good position, winning that physical battle, winning the header, and of course supplying Ayew through there. So the fact that he had something to show for his good performance was of course really great to see, and it was a great flick on. You may look at it and go, it's just a simple header, but actually the way he's able to actually jump high to Lindelof, get the angle right, and flick it literally right in between the two centre backs, right into Ayew's path, time it exactly right so he's onside. Everything about it, even though it might just look like a simple flick on, everything about it was really great. Now, obviously, that being said, he was fantastic in the first half. Yes, he was a little bit unnoticeable in the second half and struggled to get as forward as much as he did. But I just think that's the fact that United, they were 1-0 down. They sort of had to try and get their finger out, try and get back into the game, put us under a little bit more pressure, and obviously meant that Jeffrey Schlupp couldn't play as far forward as he would have done in that first half. So he was a little bit more conservative, I suppose, in his positional play, playing sort of a more midfield role rather than a forward role. And whilst that slightly affected his performance, I don't really think it affected the 7 I've given him, because realistically, if you're looking at the whole game, I think he done a solid job there. Now, I suppose a phrase I've seen people use is an industrious performance if he didn't actually accomplish anything. And basically, I think, I have to agree with that in the fact that he was industrious, he done what he had to do. But yes, there may not have been anything other than the Jordan Ayew assist to show for it. There wasn't any sort of an accomplishment of that, or it wasn't an accomplished performance in the fact there was anything to show for it, but the fact that he was industrious, doing what he had to do to limit United, as well as obviously causing them trouble at the back, was of course great to see. And you know, the main thing for me that impressed me is the fact that he managed to win that header against Lindelof, managed to actually, you know, beat him there, and then send Jordan Ayew clean through was obviously the highlight of his game. But also, just like I said, the quality of that, to get the timing, the jump right, everything about that takes class. And you know, once again, Jeffrey Schlupp showing that sort of utility he brings to the side. And you know, yes, he was probably the slowest player to ever leave the pitch when he got subbed. And of course, there's new rules now in the Premier League that you now leave pitch wherever you are. You leave the pitch at the nearest position, nearest touchline. But of course, Jeffrey Schlupp decided to sort of take the long way round. But at the end of the day, you know, it's going to take players, whether he was doing it on purpose to kill down the clock, or whether it's just players still trying to adapt to that new rule. Maybe he probably should have left the pitch at the nearest place, but instead he's walked across the whole pitch to go off and be substituted. And he probably is the slowest person ever to leave the pitch. But, you know, we're not going to really put that down on his performance, because them few seconds there, the fact that we scored right towards the end of the game, I don't think them few seconds here or there could have made any difference anyway, because there was already 5 minutes added time, 5 minutes as well added time in the first half. So you got 10 extra minutes there where United could have got something from the game. So I think a few seconds where Schlupp was obviously taking the long way round to get off the pitch wouldn't really have made any difference there. But once again here, a very good versatile performance from Jeffrey Schlupp, and of course the main highlight of that was that assist through to Ayew. And whilst he may have been a little bit more quieter in that second half, I do think the trouble he caused in the first half is fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the striker in the team, and that is of course Jordan Ayew, who I'm going to give a 9 overall. Now I must say, you know, obviously we signed Ayew in the summer on a permanent now, £2.5 million, and it looks an absolute steal. The fact that the 2 games he's played this season, he's put in fantastic performances. You know, I think I gave him a 7 or an 8 for the Everton game, and of course I've given him a 9 here. So that just goes to show, new signing, new season, he's put last season behind him and he's come back with a flash. Fantastic performance here, fully deserving of the 9 I've given him. And of course, when he was dropped last weekend for Benteke and Benteke didn't play well, a lot of questions were raised as to why Ayew didn't play, considering he was one of the best players against Everton. So this game here once again goes to show that actually Ayew maybe should be our main striker and Benteke drops to the bench, because once again Ayew showed his quality here. Now of course, towards the end of the game, because he played so well throughout, he got quite tired, so he didn't actually complete the full 90 minutes, and that was just due to him tiring. But the fact that the time he was on the pitch was so valuable in terms of us getting the result we did, in terms of his hold-up play being really strong, in terms of him getting the goal he scored, and the fact that he relieved quite a lot of pressure on our back line by actually coming deep, bringing the ball forward, and just allowing Palace a little bit more possession and a bit of time to reorganise the defence. So whilst he scored the goal to obviously put us 1-0 up, that was great, but his play aside from the goal, in terms of the hold-up play, in terms of that ability to come deep, carry the ball forward and just relieve pressure on the Palace back line, was really great to see. Now in terms of his close control and dribbling, that was also really good to see. You know, quite a lot of the time United were just putting loads of players around him, obviously quite tight situations, so the fact that he was able to maybe dribble past them a few times, you know, have that close control to manage to hold on to the ball, as well as there was one time in particular where we were literally down that right hand side, he's just managed to sort of back heel the ball rather than pass it normally. So you can see now he's got a little bit more confidence in the fact that he's starting to attempt stuff that he wouldn't have done last season, and it's obviously a credit to him in the fact that he started the season really well, and obviously a fresh from last season, where of course he only scored 2 goals for Palace. Quite a disappointing performance on that, but like I said, fresh start, and he's certainly made an impression in the first few games or so. Now of course his finish was absolutely fantastic, and I talked about Jeffrey Schlupp, you know, winning the header, putting the ball through, but just that ice cold finish from Ayew is so good, and it capped off what was a great performance from him, because if he didn't score the goal, obviously we might not have won the game or whatever, we could speculate about that, but even if he didn't score the goal, he probably still would have got an 8 for his performance, because that's how good he was in the game. So the fact that he had that goal to really show and epitomise how good his performance was of course great to see. But obviously, nice header down from Jeffrey Slupp, and the fact that Ayew was able to run in between the two defenders, stay calm as well, go one-on-one with David De Gea, and just slot it very nicely under him into the bottom corner was of course great to see. So everything about that goal, in terms of the pass from Gaeta, the header from Slupp, and of course the finish from Ayew, them three players who were involved with it, and the whole move itself was really great to see. And it was a great team goal as well, because of course every player had a role to play in that. Now of course there were a few times where, because we were under so much pressure, he was starved of the ball, but the fact that he just didn't let that put him down and actually showed clever feet to retain possession as much as he could, because he wasn't getting much of the ball, so whenever he had the ball, he made the most of it, and that was really great to see. The fact that he held the ball up well in quite a few areas, and of course the fact that when the opportunity fell to him, he took it with all his might and scored a fantastic goal, makes it even better. So everything about his performance was fantastic, fully deserving of the 9 I've given him. And yes, maybe we could talk about the fact that in the second half, because we were a little bit more under the cosh, he sort of struggled to find the ball in the second half, didn't have the ball as much as he did in the first half, but that really doesn't matter, because the rest of his performance was great. What he did do with the limited time he had on the ball was great to see as well, and certainly, you know, like I said already, the goal he scored was absolutely a cool finish. So once again here, Jordan Ayew, fully deserving of the 9 I've given him. Of course, we're going to go back to these debates as to who should start as our main striker now, but considering Ayew had such a great performance here, and he had obviously 2 weeks ago against Everton had a good performance there as well, I think it's quite obvious that the fact that he started the season so well, he should be the main striker going forward. And I do think whichever sort of formation he does play, he seems to work quite well with both Slupp and Zaha, so maybe that's something we could look at potentially going forward. So once again here, I think a 9 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is of course Wilfried Zaha, who I am going to give a 6 overall. Now, to be honest, it was a little bit of a sort of a subpar performance from Zaha, and to be honest, most of his performances this season have been, just in the fact that he's obviously had a late pre-season. Obviously all that transfer speculation obviously went on, and stuff's still going on now in terms of potential moves which could happen before the end of August, or which I don't think is going to happen, but you know, stuff like that, as well as obviously stuff that could happen in January. So of course you can understand him having a little bit of a slow start to the season, but this was a performance yet again where it was a little bit disappointing, because we did expect a little bit more from him. Now of course you've got to give him benefit of the doubt, because he was largely not really given the opportunity to do what he likes to do in the first half, and that's just because of the fact that, you know, United were playing so well, particularly in that first sort of half an hour or so. So obviously, you know, Zaha didn't have the opportunity to go forward as much as he would have liked, and of course the goal we did score came down from that came down the left hand side. So of course Zaha playing on the right wasn't really involved in that. So understandably, you can understand him not really being involved as much as he would have liked. Now, of course, the one positive of that is that the one time, or the few times that he did go forward, he obviously made Ashley Young look like an absolute mug by obviously using his trickery to sit him down and get the ball past him. And yes, Ashley Young got up and still put the ball behind for a corner, but the fact that even though Zaha didn't have many opportunities, but when he did, he was able to use his trickery to obviously sit players down, really goes to show the class he's got. And that's what you want to see from players. You know, if he's not going to have a great game, I'd rather him just do one little bit of a skill or something to get us, you know, a few yards higher up the pitch. And certainly that's what he done. Now, of course, he was restricted from going forward because obviously United having most of the possession, but I think what you've got to give him credit for is in this game here, the whole team were helping out defensively, and I think that's one of the reasons Zaha's attacking performance suffered, is just the fact that he had a fantastic work rate actually going back, and it is commendable because he obviously is hungry for goals, likes to play further up the pitch, but he was helping out the likes of Van Aanholt and Ward, whichever, you know, wing he was playing at the time. So whilst he was restricted going forward, just that contribution defensively is obviously one of the reasons I've given him the 6 overall. Now obviously you can understand him, bit of a disappointing performance, and he cut a frustrated figure at times, and to be honest, one of the reasons for that is maybe because we didn't give him as many chances as he would have liked, or we didn't have that much possession to allow him to express himself. But then also you could look at him individually and go, he didn't really get going, never really sort of got into the game, and arguably I think that is a valid reason. Now even though that was the case, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I've given him the 6 because there were a few, you know, flashes of brilliance, and the fact that maybe if we'd done a little bit better with some of these flashes of brilliance in terms of actually getting the ball into the box earlier, on many of these occasions, or just try to obviously have a shot himself. Maybe if the decision making off the back of these flashes of brilliance would have been a little bit better, then maybe something else would have come off of it. And of course, there was one chance in particular, I think it was Chiarte and maybe Slup and obviously Zaha all sort of on top of the ball at once. Zaha's obviously had the final shot and De Gea saved it. So there was one moment there where actually, he probably could have scored that chance, but because of other players around him, the fact that De Gea was right in front of him as well, he couldn't quite score from it. But the fact that he had a chance and he took it, and if it wasn't for the goalkeeper, it probably would have gone in. Just goes to show that when he did get the chances, he did try, but of course he cut a frustrated figure just because it weren't really happening for him on the day. Now, of course, he was instrumental in the winning goal. Obviously, Benteke passed the ball to Van Aanholt passed it to Wilf. He made that sort of 50 sort of 60-metre run into the box, offloaded the ball to Van Aanholt. He obviously went through and scored, and obviously he was vital in that in terms of getting into the box. But the fact that his ball retention wasn't as good as it normally was being. You've got to look at someone like Ayew, who's really good at holding up the ball, whereas Zaha on the other side was a complete opposite, and that just meant there was more pressure on Joe Ward because we kept sort of recycling possession or giving possession back to United. Obviously meant they'd come and attack us again, so maybe you could argue that Zaha should have done a little bit better because it put us under unnecessary pressure. But like I've said already, it was a sort of an under par performance from him as well, but still, giving him the benefit of the doubt, there were a few bits of brilliance here and there. So I do think the 6 for Zaha is a fair result. So now I'm going to briefly move on to the 3 subs we made in the game. Obviously, Christian Benteke, Andros Townsend and James McCarthy. Now, Christian Benteke, came on the pitch, didn't really have that much time, didn't really have that much impact in the game, so I'm going to give him a 5 overall. And to be honest, there was a little bit of good interplay, good link-up play here and there, and he did get one chance to go forward, but nothing really came off of it. And like I said with the goal, obviously he was the guy who made that he made the tackle from Pogba, passed the ball to Van Aanholt, and obviously he started the move for the goal. So whilst he wasn't necessarily that heavily involved in anything that happened, and he didn't have that many chances, he obviously was involved in making that crunching challenge which started up the attack for the goal. So of course we're going to give him credit there. Obviously Andros Townsend, going to give him a 6, good defensive work here and there. We obviously pushed quite deep into the box, so he was just giving that support and giving us that energy off the bench, which of course was great to see. And of course James McCarthy came on for the final few minutes of the game just to give us fresh legs. Going to give him a 5 because he worked hard in the time he was on the pitch, but because it was so late in the game and because we were just trying to conserve our lead rather than doing anything impressive, I just think he done what he had to do, done a solid shift there, and arguably deserves the 5 I've given him. So just sort of go over sort of a more brief summary of the game, because I've talked quite long enough already, but I think the main thing for me is that the disappointment last weekend against Sheffield United, obviously on Sunday, the fact that we responded in a perfect way. We didn't only respond with a good performance, but we responded in a fantastic performance which allowed us to beat Man United, is what makes it even better. And it's the life as a Palace fan, isn't it? You lose to a newly promoted side, but then you go on and get your first ever win against Man United, and that just seems how it works. And we've got 4 points from 3 games so far this season, so on paper it looks good, but then when you look at it you'll be confused, because it's like you beat United but you lost to Sheffield United. But anyway, I was really happy with that, and the fact that I was quite worried before the game. I was like, 3-0 loss, that's probably what we're going to get. But the fact that we responded in the perfect way, put last week behind us, and just came out afresh. Everyone done their bit. The 4 changes Hodgson made to the starting 11 worked perfectly. So everything about it was really great to see. Now, of course, in terms of the performance itself, we could talk about the goals and how good they were and the players involved in that. But the main reason we won this game was because of the defensive performance, because of how disciplined and organised we were at back. And of course, we know Hodgson always likes to set up defensively, but the fact that he done it so well, and it's no easy feat. It's no easy feat when you consider the quality that United had, and obviously the pace as well, because we've got quite a slow back 4 bar Van Aanholt. So it was no easy feat for us, but the fact that we managed to overcome that, particularly when United were piling on that pressure in the second half, the fact that we were able to overcome that, didn't let the occasion get to us, and just remained disciplined and organised throughout the whole game, was of course great to see. And of course the goal we did concede, it was a wonder strike. Nothing. Maybe we could have closed James down a little bit quicker, but the fact that the goal we conceded was such a wonder goal just goes to show how well the Palace back line did in terms of containing the threat that United had. Now, of course, in the second half, because there was a little bit more pressure on us. There was tackles flying in here, there and everywhere, and of course eventually one of them did end up in the penalty for us, against us, obviously, with Rashford missing it. And of course, gratefully for us, that Rashford did miss it, but obviously it sort of gave us a bit more hope in the fact that they've had a chance to equalise in the game, they've missed it, and that sort of just seemed to obviously affect the fans as well. We're getting sort of more upbeat, we're like, okay, there's actually a chance we can win this game. And of course for the players as well, they've just seen the opposition miss a penalty, so that's really going to help them push on in the game, and it certainly did do that up until obviously when we conceded to make it 1-1, but of course we've done the job and went at the other end to score. But like I've said already, the fact that United were putting us under so much pressure in that second half, the fact that we just overcome that by putting in tackles here and there and everywhere, and the fact that even though we made a dodgy tackle, gave away a penalty, the fact that they missed it seemed to sort of give us that boost to see us out for the rest of the game. And yes, they made up for that penalty miss by scoring. Obviously, Daniel James equalised in the 88th, 89th minute. And yes, it was a sickener for the away side. I said before the game, I'll be happy with a 1-1 draw, or even anything less than a 3-0 loss. I was like, I'll be happy with that. But the fact that we played so well and then we conceded in the last minute of normal time, it's really annoying. But the fact that we made up for that, we all lost hope. We're like, the opportunity to get our first ever Premier League victory against United is gone. But then the fact that we just see that marauding run by Patrick Van Aanholt and Zaha to snatch that winner in the sort of 93rd minute as well was fantastic to see. And the fact that the way he hit it so hard, that drive, that determination to get it under De Gea, the fact that it sort of went under his arms, really just it just really made up for the fact that we conceded that late goal, and we finally got something we deserved in terms of putting in a good performance. We get a good result, and we finally got to beat Man United. Now, some people may look at it and go, it's a smash and grab. We just sat back defensively, hit them on the break. And to be honest, most Palace supporters won't care, and I'm certainly in that bracket. I don't care how we win games as long as we win games and get points on the board. But there were still a few outstanding individual performances as well as just an overall good team performance. So whilst people, and United fans in particular, will say, oh, that's a smash and grab, it doesn't matter, you got lucky, it was a hard gritted, determined performance from Palace, both defensively and offensively, and we fully deserved the point we were getting. And it was great to see that finally we had a good performance, and it all culminated in us obviously making history with our first ever Premier League win against United. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and why I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, when you consider it was such a good team performance, I realistically could put up all of these starting 11 up for this award, really, because performances from all the players across the field were great. And certainly if you're looking at sort of individually, yes, some players may not have been as good as others were, but everyone's still done their bit to obviously help us get across the line and get the win. So realistically, it was quite difficult for me to narrow it down to 4 players. But me looking back at the game and looking at individually at players, and certainly looking across Twitter in particular, seeing who people are giving praise, I do think the 4 players I've put down really sort of gives a fair account of players across the whole team, but also across different positions as well, because I think you've got to give credit to obviously the defence, obviously the midfield as well for containing United, and of course the attackers for scoring a goal. So I do think the 4 players I've picked really are a fair reflection of that. So I've gone with Gary Cahill, Patrick Van Aanholt, Cheku Kouyaté and Jordan Ayew. So I think a nice mix there of players. Now, in terms of Gary Cahill, quite simple. He was absolutely outstanding, read the game really well, used his experience to organise the back 4, and the fact that under pressure of the occasion, and of course from the opposition as well, the fact that he just sort of overcome that, was making vital headed clearances, particularly in that second half, and was just really that solid rock at the back, is why I've put him up for the award. Obviously Patrick Van Aanholt here, he dealt really well with Wan-Bissaka and James, particularly when they were on the attack. He was able to deal with these players really well, and of course going forward as well, he was able to get past Wan-Bissaka a few times and really make life difficult for Wan-Bissaka. So in both an attacking and a defensive sense, I think Patrick Van Aanholt was obviously had a really good performance, and the fact that he sort of added to that performance, the cherry on top of the cake almost, the fact that he got that winning goal in the 93rd minute really is basically got the reward for his good performance, and it was a really well taken goal. Obviously, De Gea should be doing better, but just that desire and that energy right in the last few minutes of the game to obviously run, almost sort of half the length of the pitch and then just put so much power on it, it gets past the goalkeeper. It was obviously really great to see. Now, in terms of Cheku Kiyate, obviously playing in the midfield, he timed his tackles really well. He bossed the midfield both with his physicality and his tenacity. And, you know, yes, he was a little bit sloppy in possession here and there, but he made up for that in the fact that he played everywhere. He seemed to cover so much of the field. He kept running, kept making tackles, and basically sort of disrupting United in the midfield and basically making life difficult for them by obviously slowing their game down and allowing us to reshape and reorganise. So the fact that he was just a nuisance to Man United, and you know, the reason he was a nuisance is just because of how well he was playing, how well he was timing his challenges, just that energy he had. Everything about his game in the midfield was of course great to see. And of course the final player, obviously Jordan Ayew. Yes, he didn't complete the full 90 minutes, but that's just because he was absolutely knackered because of the hard work and energy he put into the game up until he got taken off as a sub. The fact that his hold-up play was great, the fact that he relieved pressure on the Palace back line by holding up the ball and bringing others into play, the fact that he had close control and dribbling to obviously get the ball past players, and the fact that he, you know, on top of all of that, he scored a fantastic goal, nice flick on from Jeffrey Slupp, and a fantastic finish under David De Gea, running in between the two centre backs and just slotting it under him was of course great to see, and it capped off what was a great performance. Now, like I said at the beginning, it is really difficult to pick one player in particular, and certainly the fact that I narrowed it down to 4 was hard enough already. And you know, like I said, you know, I've picked players from across the field. I've picked defenders, I've picked midfielders, and I've picked attackers, because I do think across the field, even though there are a few players who I've given 5s and 6s to, they weren't necessarily that great. There were still parts of their game where contributions are like, yeah, you were really key to us getting the result. But I think the 4 players here is a fair reflection, and certainly they all deserve credit. But for me, I think there is only one clear winner, and the fact that he got a 9 in the play ratings really makes it up for me. So congratulations, Ayew. You win this week's Man of the Match award. Now, you don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And realistically, the only reason I've given it to him as opposed to someone like Cahill or Kiyate or Van Aanholt is just that sheer energy and commitment and determination he showed in the game, as well as the fact that he scored the first goal, which was a fantastic take and strike under David De Gea. So everything about his game was great, but in particular, you know, the goal he scored and just the energy he showed throughout the game. And you know, it really shows when players get taken off, they don't get taken off because obviously it's a tactical change or they're not playing well. When they get taken off generally because they're knackered, it really goes to show that they've put in a really good shift in the side. So once again, obviously, you know, you've got a special mentions to obviously Cahill, Van Aanholt and Kiyate, but for me, you know, there's only one winner here, and that is Jordan Ayew. So congratulations on winning this week's Man of the Match award. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Patrick Van Aanholt and Gary Cahill following the game.
Jordan, fantastic victory today for the team. Everyone must be delighted in the dressing room.
Yeah, we're happy. I think we did a good performance, very good performance, and just need to enjoy the moment, because it's not easy to come in and win at Old Trafford, so it's positive.
You must have been, obviously you disappointed to miss out last week, but it's a great way to come back into the team with that goal.
Well, obviously I'm a striker, so I'm happy to score, and me and Christian and Corner, we're all together, and we have a good competition, positive, and so yeah, to just come back in this week and score a goal is a good thing for me. But like I said, it's a teamwork, and obviously I'm pleased. I don't have much things to say. Just have to congratulate the guys for getting the 3 points today.
Nice to hear the fans singing your name throughout the game.
Well, obviously, like I said, it's just things are obviously it's nice to hear, but like I said, I keep on working hard, so it's good. It's a good thing for me, and like I said, it's just the beginning, so hopefully there's more to come.
And finally, you're the first line of defence. A lot of defending to do today. How much hard work was it?
It was really, really hard, but like I said, it's normal, and when you come to Old Trafford, obviously you have to defend and you have to try and make an effort. It's a teamwork, and I think today we were really, really solid, and that's why we were lucky to go away with the 3 points.
Patrick Van Aanholt, a winner in injury time at Old Trafford when Palace haven't won here in the league since 1989. How do you feel?
Delighted. Very happy. We knew it was going to be a hard game today, and we've been working very hard in the whole week on our shape, on our defensive shape. So we knew that we were going to have the ball. So in the end, we worked very hard and we got the 3 points.
How tiring is it playing like that when you're up against it for quite a long while?
Very tiring, you know, because obviously you can't defend for 90 minutes. But we did it. We dug in and we did very well. We knew they were going to have the ball a lot. We knew they were going to test us in the back behind us. And so we had to stay tight together, you know, and that's what we did. We were compact throughout the whole game, defended very well, and yeah, we got the win in the end.
Jordan Ayew with the first goal, missed out last week, but what a way to come back in the team.
Yeah, well, it was a great header from Jeff. So Jordan put Jordan in one against one with the goalkeeper, and he finished it very good, and that was the 1-0. Then we went in the half time and we said if we keep a clean sheet, then we win the game, because they need to come, and obviously they came. So we digged in very hard, and I think our luck was on our side in the second half. Mostly they missed a penalty, and then they scored one. Yeah, it was a brilliant goal, you know. It wasn't hit the top of the net. So we did very well, and in the end, I scored the winner.
Yeah, that winner, I mean, obviously not the first goal you scored against David De Gea. You've beat him at the near post last time as well, didn't you?
At home, yeah, but we lost that game. But unfortunately today we won the game, so I'm very happy with the 3 points.
Very fantastic result today. Was it a case of game plan well executed?
Very much so, yeah. And for the game plan to be well executed, you have to work. You have to be together. You know, plenty of talking, plenty of organisation out there, and we cracked it today in that formation. We did very well. We worked extremely hard for each other, and we tried to counter when we had the chance. It was difficult to come here, and you know, there's going to be games where we're going to have a lot more possession. We know that, and this game away from home is not probably one of them. So that being said, we have to be in a good shape. We have to work very hard, and we did it. So fantastic, unbelievable result. I don't think Palace have won here, so you know, something to be very proud of, and yeah, great to be back out there.
It's nearly 30 years since the club won here in the league, and the first goal was something from 1989. It was classic Route 1, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, but it showed a lot of composure, you know. 75,000 people showed a lot of composure to slot that away, so that was a nice start. And so give us something to kind of hold on to. The equaliser was something special. That was a fantastic finish. But to show the desire to go on, you know, from there. That's a mentality thing, you know. You could easily crumble at that moment, and I think to steady the game a little bit, and then obviously we hit him on the break. Great desire from Patrick at the last dying seconds of the game to make that run the whole way and get a shot off. So great scenes at the end, fantastic win, a reaction from the game last week, which was important, and we're up and running.
And finally, what's it like for you adapting, being a different kind of club? Palace more the underdog today, under a lot more pressure than maybe you've been used to the past few years.
Yeah, it's a little bit different in that sense. But I think, nevertheless, if you're talking about Tottenham, Man City, you know, Liverpool, the big boys coming here, it's on the onus. The onus is always on Manchester United to take the game to. I don't think that changes. They have some very special players. They're a big, massive club, and the onus at home is for them to take the game to you. So, but I understand it's slightly different, but that makes the win even sweeter.
Well, congratulations. There are a lot of very happy Crystal Palace fans tonight.
Yeah, they were great, weren't they? I mean, this is a hard place to come as an away fan, because there's 75,000 people, and what are we, 2,000 or 3,000, I guess. We don't get that many tickets, so to make themselves heard as much as they did, I thought that was a great achievement, and it's nice that they've seen an historic occasion, because I don't know if we won here at Old Trafford before, in which case it would be many years ago, not in modern time anyway, have we won here. So these people will be able to tell their grandchildren, I was there that day when Crystal Palace actually beat Man United, after Man United had spent, you know, an awful lot of money to make sure they've got a top-class team. But we held them off. We dealt with their attacks very well. The shape and the discipline of the team gave me enormous pleasure and satisfaction, and I'm very proud of the players for having pulled it off.
Yeah, the last time we won in the league here, Mark Bright got both the goals. That's how long ago it was.
Was that here at Old Trafford or Sellers Park?
Here at Old Trafford.
Oh, they won at Old Trafford.
Yeah. So, but this time, Jordan Ayew, the goal scorer. It was a lovely finish, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a good run he made. It felt kindly. I thought he composed himself very well, and you know, showed the goalkeeper he was going to play the ball into the far corner, and then tucked it past him towards the near post instead, so he took that goal very well. But apart from his goal, his all-round performance I thought was excellent. And I was also pleased to see that when he had to come off 15 minutes to go, obviously he was tiring after all the work he put in. I was pleased to see the work rate of Christian Benteke as well, you know. So between them, they looked after the 90 minutes extremely well and did the job we wanted them to do, i.e. make certain that Pogba didn't get too much time on the ball to open us up with his defence-splitting passes.
It was an incredible shift from everyone. They must have been tired at the end, so even more impressive that Patrick and Wilf were running up the other end and getting the winner.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, Wilford lost the ball to Pogba. You know, Pogba had stolen the ball from him with an incredible tackle, really, when he was doing what I thought he should do at that stage of the game, 1-0 up, but he had a little 1v1 and a lot of space around, and I was expecting him to take Pogba on and actually get past him. Unfortunately for Wilf, Pogba produced a magnificent tackle and they ended up equalising from the cross ball afterwards. But the good thing is that when he got the opportunity again, he took it as he should do, you know, to take the defender on, to get into the penalty area, to really ask the questions. And on this occasion, you know, we had the fortune instead of Pogba having the fortune in the previous one.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Patrick Van Aanholt and Gary Cahill had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Manchester United. But make sure to come back next week for the post-match review of the game against Colchester United in the Cup. So thanks for listening and remember to up the Palace.